Good day, grade 12 learners, and welcome to today's English home language lesson. My name is Vash Suchit, and this lesson is proudly brought to you by the Gauteng Department of Education in collaboration with the Cybono Discovery Center. Now, grade 12s, I can imagine the nerves that is now shot in your systems, and it is what it is. But remember, everything is going to now culminate in this particular next 3 to 4 weeks for you. If you have not studied, if you have not put in the effort, all you can do right now is to sit down and dedicate every single minute that you have available to study and make sure that you maximize the marks that you achieve in these papers to enable you to have a better future. That's the only thing. This comes once in a lifetime. And if it is not done correctly, then it basically means you are going to be messing up your entire future. All right? This certificate for matric will be with you for the rest of your life. So act now and make sure that you revise and you prepare yourself as best as possible for the exams that lay ahead. Now, tomorrow we're going to start off with our English home language paper 3. This is the opportunity, grade 12s, where you're going to have the best opportunity to excel with your marks. So please take this paper very seriously. It's 100 marks. It's going to give you a time allocation as well of 3 hours for you to make sure that you can get the most marks out of 100 in this paper. All right, so we're going to be looking at that last push for you, that strategy that we have in place for you to do very well in your paper 3. Now, if you that candidate who's been struggling to pass English, then the 40% strategy or 45% strategy would be ideal for you. All right, but I'm under the belief that all of you want to get more than 50 or 60% in English home language, if not 80% in English home language. And therefore, the strategy we have, you have to look at the different levels at which you are performing at and how you're going to tweak the areas now to make sure you're passing very well. All right, so 100 marks for this paper. The first one is obviously the essay, which is the 50 mark that you have to get. All right, and if you target anything from 25 out of 50 upwards, then you're comfortable with this particular section, because that means you get 50% for the essay moving forward. All right, but if you're going to go and get more than that, like 30 or 40 out of 50, then you're already well on your way for this paper. All right, so target at least, please, grade 12s, between 25 and 30 as an average for your essay. All right, then you've got the section B, which would be the transactionals. Now you will be given your topics, and those topics will come from the various categories, which I'll discuss with you shortly. Okay, you will then have to ensure that you at least get between 13 and 15 as a minimum out of 25 to be comfortable in this paper. But if you, again, that candidate who wants to do very well, your focus should be anything from 20 upwards out of 25 for the transactionals. And remember, we have 3 pieces here, which is 1 essay and 2 transactional pieces. All right, and thereafter, grade 12s, we have to make sure that we've mastered the process writing for this particular paper. Now, everything you do has to be planned and it has to be done correctly. All right, so the first thing about this paper is you need to ensure that your planning is done thoroughly. Now, I don't expect you, or the examiners don't expect you to go and do a mind map, a full draft, and then a final piece. All right, your time is going to be obviously short to do all 3 of those things. Okay, but if you have at the beginning of your paper a plan that thoroughly shows us where you're heading in terms of your main ideas for each paragraph, for example, what are you going to talk about in those paragraphs? Just that diagram will give us enough information to show us that you have planned this piece of work. All right. So planning is very important. Your drafting would obviously then also come out from that planning section, which would then be your piece of work that you're going to submit, that final essay. All right. So while you are putting all of the ideas together, this is the drafting part. And then the redrafting obviously is when you have now removed certain ideas and included other ideas. All right. So your planning needs to ensure that it's covering those three aspects. All right. And then your final product that you write out, you would then be doing the proofreading. Now, the proofreading is obviously where you're checking for all of your errors, which I'll also cover with you just now. And then you're going to obviously do the presentation part, which is the final product that will be submitted. All right. So planning, I did say to you, please, is very important. So while you're planning this particular paper, you need to firstly, grade 12s, take that 10-minute reading time, read all your instructions very carefully, all right? And then browse over the topics that you have been given, and then try and see which one of the topics you are very comfortable with for you to look at writing your essay for, all right? And the same thing with the transactionals. So planning, understand your instructions, and please think carefully about the purpose. In other words, why you're writing this piece of work and who is the audience that you're targeting with regards to this particular piece. And then obviously, when we're looking at the transactionals, remember your format and your structure is very important. You're going to get marks for those things, okay? As well as the essay, because that's where we're looking at, do you, for example, know paragraphs must be used? Do you have a topic sentence in each of those paragraphs? That sort of thing, okay? The next part that's very important is the brainstorming of the topic. Now, you have been given a topic and it says to you, please write the essay out on any of these topics, okay? For example. So look for the keywords. In other words, what is the examiner wanting from me when I read that question? All right? And when you read it, quickly note on your paper there some notes onto probably a few ideas that you think might work for that particular topic. All right. And then, as I mentioned, that mind map is where you're now going to put down your ideas. All right. So please then remember here we're choosing the best ideas from the selections that from the alternatives you have made, and then you're going to put them together into paragraphs. All right. Now, if we're looking at this here, this is the particular diagram that is given to you. It is kind of a mind map, all right? Now, if you really want to make sure that you are going to capture the attention of the reader, you're going to keep them engrossed throughout, you're going to make sure that it's a good read for them, then you can probably most likely target this kind of setup, where you dedicate a paragraph or two, for example, dealing with the imagery of sight, all right? Keeping us engaged with creative imagery, all right? Then maybe touching something on an idea about a fragrance or as something like a smell associated with the topic that you are talking about. Think about imagery along there, okay? And then the third one, maybe look at how you can sort of like tantalize the taste buds of the reader. In other words, make them imagine something that's scrumptious or exciting. All these things will be relevant according to the topic given to you. So your topic is the go-to thing here, and then you work around with these ideas. All right. Also target the sense of sound or touch. Give the reader something to sort of feel while they are reading your particular piece of work. All right. Then, please, this is also something that you must focus on. That particular sentence or idea that grabs the attention of the reader, which will be the hook. Now, that is when you're creating a situation in your writing piece. Now, this is only with regards to the essay, because that's your creative writing piece, okay? You're creating a situation there where you capture my attention and keep me engaged. All right? Then you're going to obviously move on to the exposition part, where you're introducing a storyline. You're including characters that you might be speaking about here, okay? Now, this could be obviously when you're dealing with maybe a topic that's talking about your experience of something, or you're reflecting on something. So you would be the character involved here, right? And you're sharing your experience. So you'd include some background information about where this particular thing happened and how it happened, all right? Then, if you're looking at having maybe a conflict introduced in your essay, then that is where you would have that situation being described to the reader that was preventing a positive outcome for you in that particular setup. All right. And then we have the other parts here, which is also very important, like your rising action. Okay, that is where we are following while you're writing all the events that led to a part where you are at right now, and you've created a sense of suspense. And while you're at that point of creating that suspense, you can also engage with the flashback technique, where you talk about maybe previous experiences that the characters went through, or yourself in this instance went through before you got to this point, okay? And that climax position, or that idea that we're talking about there, is that most exciting part of the essay. All right, it's the one where the reader is so ready for what is going to be this turning point for us, okay? And there we go into the falling action from there, which is when you then, bring the reader back into what's happening now and how you are going to stabilize the situation, okay? And eventually you're coming to the resolution, where you have come to the conclusion of the story and showing us how it's ended for that particular character or characters in your creative essay. All right, so let's look at it in terms of the process writing, okay? The approach for the process here, okay? The first thing is, as I mentioned, the drafting. Please follow the plan and just write until your piece of work is finished. Don't stress about the mistakes you've made thus far. You can always come back and fix them. So while you're editing, you will definitely be able to remove certain things, all right? Or add in certain things. But again, as I mentioned, before you do your final piece, make sure you thoroughly understand which ideas you're going to use and what ideas you are going to formulate around that one main idea. All right. So here, when you are looking at the redrafting process, you're asking yourself, does my introduction, for example, does it have a strong opening? Do I make a bold statement? Have I included also, for my next few paragraphs, have I included a range of sentences, moving from my simple to my complex to my compound sentences? All right. Have I included statements, for example, if you're writing, for example, something related to an argumentative or an expository essay or a discursive essay, okay? Have you then also used interesting facts or interesting information that will keep the reader engaged? And then the vocabulary you use, grade 12s. Is the vocabulary that you've used appropriate for the level of a grade 12 learner? And maybe a year or two beyond that, okay? So keep that in or at the back of your mind, to think that I'm addressing somebody who is thinking about a grade 12 learner at this point, or even 3 or 4 years after the grade 12 year. So by now, I should have vocabulary within my frame of reference that is definitely far away from words like sad, happy, upset. You got to come up with the antonyms, the synonyms, okay? The homonyms. All of those things need to be starting to come out when you are writing, okay? Okay, further on, then if it's the non-fiction text, are your facts, for example, correct? Now, you can't just say 1 in 4 people go through this and then think, okay, no one's really going to worry about whether it makes sense or not. It is obviously important that the stats or the facts that you are saying are actually what they are in the real world. All right. So although you're creating a scenario, you're creating a story for us, try and put in very relevant and factual information as well. All right. And then this obviously is backed up by the evidence, right, that I'm talking about. And then is there a logical flow throughout your piece of work? And have you basically at the end, the conclusion, made sure that you've closed off that essay very well? Okay. The other thing that's important is when you are then almost, or you've done almost ready to submit this particular essay or for marking now, right? You are going to make sure that you have checked the spelling. You've looked out for the common errors that you might have made over the time frames, okay? You are going to look at the grammar that you've used. You're checking that there's no concord errors, for example. You're checking that you've used correct punctuation marks while you are writing your piece of work. So these are things that if you don't check it, grade 12s, it's going to cost you marks that you don't really need to lose. Because remember, there is a language mark awarded to you as well when we mark with the rubric. All right, so now let's look at the nitty-gritty parts of the essay. So the structure of the essay is very simple. You've written essays throughout your years at school. But now we're saying to you, please, we shouldn't be sitting and saying, okay, yes, this is where the introduction is, or this is where the conclusion is. It should be very clear to the reader where these things are. All right. So the first paragraph, as you know, is your introduction. So that is where you are going to capture my attention. You are going to keep me engrossed so that I want to continue reading your essay. So it's short and it's catchy. If you target about 5 lines as an introduction, then that's more or less where we want you to go, okay? Thereafter, we're looking at the body. So if you imagine somebody's face, for example, think about a face. What will appeal to you first, okay? Then you talk about those things. And then the body is obviously now where you're going to put the meat on in terms of what the ideas that you have come up with, all right? So it's the meat of the essay, it's the full content. Now here we're saying about 3 to 4 paragraphs is what you are looking for with the body, okay? Each of those paragraphs must have your topic sentence, grade 12. And the topic sentence is basically the main idea of each paragraph, okay? And then around that main idea, you will have another maybe 2 or 3 sub ideas that add more flavor to the first idea, okay? So ensure that it is a logical flow of the main idea in the first paragraph and your mini ideas, and then the next one, and you carry on like that in 3, 4, and 5. Okay? You're going to then make sure you're using your interlinking words. We've spoken about this before. Remember words like therefore, furthermore, however. Those are the kind of words we're looking at, all right? To take us from one paragraph to the next paragraph to the next paragraph. And then we come to the final part. Now, it's one thing about, just leaving us to imagine what happens next. But we would like you to please ensure that you have an effective conclusion. So you round up all your ideas and you make sure that you've linked all the paragraphs together in the conclusion. All right? And then refer now to back to your introduction when you are doing the conclusion to make sure that you have nicely summed up the essay. All right? Now, here is a strategy that you can use. We've spoken about this previously, your 5 W's and the H. All right? So when you take the topic that you've decided to work with, you've got to realize who's the narrator. Okay? Is it you as a person sharing experiences, reflecting on certain things, or is there another person's story that you are relating? All right? So that will then answer your question about who the narrator is. Then what are you writing about? Again, that is linked to the topic. So when you're finding your keywords in the topic, that's where you're going to now move towards, okay? What am I writing about? What's the key idea that I'm talking about here? Is a question you must ask yourself. Then the next one is, where is the story? Either my story or the events of the other person's life that I'm talking about. Where has this taken place? So that background information now becomes relevant. Then why am I writing this particular piece, or yeah, basically your purpose will come out here. Okay, so you obviously are writing it to share the idea that you have about the topic. So that must be there at the back of your mind. Okay, when is the story taking place? Again, that's linked to your background information. Okay, so when you're talking about the present moment and you're going to the flashback technique of recalling past events, then it's going to bring in the time frame we're looking for there. Okay, and then finally, how is the content that you've constructed now, how is that going to affect me as the reader? Now the entire thing here comes out in terms of the impact. When I read your essay, or when the marker reads your essay, sorry, they need to feel something about the essay that you wrote. Okay, they need to say, wow, this is a very interesting piece, or this is an outstanding idea, this is an idea that makes me think beyond my realm of experience. That is the kind of thing that you need to be aiming at. Okay, so always think about what the other person will write about, and then be original and different. So you're taking into cognizance the common sense ideas, and then you're trying to move away from the common sense ideas and create your own original piece from there. All right, so that is a strategy that you can employ for your um, paper 3. Right, the essays. Now let's look at the various types. I'm just going to run through these very quickly because you should be knowing them by now. The narrative obviously is there to entertain the reader. You're telling a story, you are talking about something that has happened or, taken place, and it has to be very convincing. So you are telling us, giving us a storyline, you're using your past tense, you are making sure that you have an introduction, giving us background information about where this actual scene is taking place. You have to include a conflict situation in there where something has stopped a person from excelling or having a positive outcome for that particular setup. All right, and then the conclusion is where you're going to now give us the resolution to the conflict that character went through. All right, then we've got the next essay, which is the descriptive essay. Now here we use a lot of descriptive words, yes, but it's when we are describing something or someone or the events that someone went through in a very vivid manner. So powerful descriptions are very important. Emotive language, in other words, diction that is going to be taking us on a different journey altogether. All right. Figurative language, they are talked about the imagery. Try and think about imagery that is away from the common imagery that we know about. Okay, so build this imagery in the mind of the reader. So here with regards to the descriptive essay, you again can use the present tense to create that feeling of the reader going through this experience with you. All right, try and appeal to all the senses as far as possible here of the readers in terms of their sense of smell, touch, taste, okay, as well as their emotions. Try and tap into that, okay? Then when you're doing all of this grade 12s, remember the descriptions I told you about. Descriptive words need to be used. Figurative language needs to be used, okay? Um, you know, make sure there's a main idea, a theme, or a lesson that is there, sorry, that you are trying to portray to the reader. Okay, and that will affect the reader's emotions, obviously. Right? Then we've got the next essay, which is the reflective one. Now, this is a nice one because remember, we at a present moment in grade 12 now, for example, and certain things have happened to bring us to this particular point. So this is what the reflective essay is all about. It gives an emotional reaction and feeling on a specific matter. Maybe it's personal or even expressing feelings about what a person went through. So there's very much this thing about being sincere in how you put your ideas across. So here you get to be very subjective and original in what you say. So you can also look at your personal experience with regards to the topic that's given to you, and then give us examples of what you went through so that we can also identify with that experience. Okay, so don't try to convince us that that is the best thing ever, because while we're reading, we should be sort of convinced about your idea that is important. Okay, and then have a strong conclusion, please, where you are summing up, as I mentioned, all the ideas within the essay and linked to your introduction. So you want us to get the idea that you've thought deeply about this particular topic and you've shared ideas that are very much close or you're close to you as a person, right? So please remember to use your synonyms, your antonyms if you need to, okay? That is very important with the reflective essay as well. Then we come to the one which we sort of think that you should be very good at because you love to argue with your teachers, your parents, your friends, okay? But sometimes we make the mistake of not knowing the differences in terms of the argumentative essay versus the other two types of essays, okay? So the argumentative essay here is when you take one side of the argument and you convince us that that particular statement or idea is the only one that is important, all right? And everything else is not important. So that is written in the past tense, present tense as well, please, grade 12s. And then make sure that it's clear, your idea is clear, it's formal language that's being used. Your introduction states your viewpoint of whether you are agreeing with that topic or you are not agreeing with the topic. So that must come out very clearly, okay? And then when you start in each paragraph thereafter, remember to refer to your introduction because that's where you've stated the point of view that you are agreeing with or disagreeing with, okay? And then the conclusion again will link to the introduction because now you are rounding off that argument, okay? Now, remember I spoke about the other one that can be confusing? It is this one. So the discursive essay is where we are showing both sides of the argument, all right? So here you are showing us the opposing views impartially. Again, grade 12s, use the present tense. Make sure, again, we've got forceful, formal language being used. This is usually in the third person because you are showing us the one side and the other side of the argument as well. And here, please avoid strong emotive persuasive language, okay? Because you are trying to be impartial here. The argumentative, you are very much encouraged to be, emotive and persuasive. But with the discursive, try and avoid or limit the amount of persuasive language used here. And then your conclusion, obviously, again, rounding up where you're going to now give us a recommendation that sort of, comes together after looking at the one side and the other side. And you give us another viewpoint, okay? So the introduction for this is to state what the issue is and then state that you will consider it from two different points of view. Then you're going to have to say, okay, my next two paragraphs will be where I am in favor of the topic. And here I will give the evidence of why I'm in favor of the topic. All right? Then your next two paragraphs will be dedicated to why you're against the topic. And then the evidence on those two paragraphs will also substantiate that viewpoint. And then the final one is the conclusion where you're summarizing both sides of the argument and giving us a recommendation. All right, so please follow this recipe here for ensuring that you are able to excel with the discursive essay. All right, then we've got the next ones for how you must choose your topic. Please, as I mentioned to you, that first 10 minutes, you read all of your topics and you then find out which one you are most comfortable with. So read the topics and write down about 2 to 3 ideas on each of the topic. By that time, you would be able to eliminate the topics that you are not comfortable with or you know very little about. While you're reading the topics, underline all the keywords, as I said to you, and make sure you do that because you don't want to miss out any important information when you are drafting the essay. Then please make sure you choose a topic that you fully understand. It doesn't help to take a topic where you only know half of what it means, because then the rest of the topic is not answered for us, okay? So if you're uncertain about a topic, leave it and go to the one that you are most comfortable with, okay? Then, for example, we will also have in this paper the quote. Now, when you have the quote, grade 12s, we are saying to you, please make sure the essay is talking about all the aspects of the quote. All right. So you have to read through the quote at least 3 times, dissecting. In other words, break it down into simpler parts for understanding and define the key words that are in that particular quote. Now, when you are working with the quote, establish what is the essence of this quote. What does the examiner want me to take away from reading this particular quote? If you don't know what it means, it is very important that you don't attempt it. Go to another question and see where you are able to interpret another question maybe in a better way. All right? When you have defined the topic, please then remember you must get the spirit of that quote captured. So you should decide what you want to write about and then focus on what the audience is looking for in order to be impressed by what you're writing. Okay? Then remember, your quotes are a subject that you can interpret both literally or figuratively. In other words, you should interpret them in such a way where your writing will be a well-crafted piece of work. It must be where, if you're going to do the literal sense of what this quote is all about, then it must be a very well-crafted literal meaning of the quote. If you're taking it to the figurative side, in other words, you are putting connotative meanings, including a lot of imagery, all of that, then you need to please ensure that you've interpreted this quote in such a way that it is almost something that I would not even imagine about. Okay? But again, the words that the quote have been the quotes that the words used in the quote, has to be taken note of. Please don't just choose one word and decide I'm going to write about this. You got to capture the spirit of the quote. All right. Then also remember, you will be given the visual stimuli. All right. So if all the other topics don't make sense to you and you're most comfortable with the pictures, then remember that you also need to know what you're going to do with that picture. This is where we find that many of the candidates have this tendency to just describe the visual, which is, acceptable. But if you're looking at getting a higher mark, then you need to start looking at all aspects of that picture as well. Okay, so please remember, we want it to be a well-crafted piece of work. So this particular picture is meant to create an emotion within you, a reaction that must happen, and you need to relate that reaction to us within that essay. So you need to think, okay, this particular image, what could possibly come out of this image? For example, maybe there's a rampant killing spree going on, for example. So this might look, in this, for example, on this image, might look very easy and very calm and harmonious, but there could be underlying negative issues that you could be pulling out of it. All right. So like, that still waters runs deep imagery, for example, okay, that you can talk about. So please remember to look at the visual stimuli very well. Make sure that you're able to absorb all the details in that particular visual and that certain of the senses have been captured through your writing. So allow your imagination, grade 12s, to correlate with the image that is given to you. So visualize the scene or possibilities of what can happen within in that scene. Look for possible, background information that you can include in the particular piece, and then make sure that when the reader is reading that piece of work, they must be really affected in a positive way for that. So describe the visual in detail and then state the message that it is embodying for you at that particular point. All right. Please ensure that there's a relationship created between the abstract thing and the image that you are writing about. Please think of a storyline that is possibly linked to this particular image, or there could be an argument that you could bring across as well when you look at the visual. All right. Now, remember, it's creative writing for the essay, and you need to generate your own theme, okay, related to that particular visual that you see. So it's important that you're interpreting the visual accurately. So remember to link the theme that you are trying to work here with to the topic that you are given. All right. A strong plot must come through. A strong line of argument, for example, must come through if you're choosing to go either the argumentative way of writing or the narrative or reflective way of writing. So there you would know what you need to do with those type of essays and make sure that you are doing that. All right. Please then remember to sort of like, weave certain ideas throughout your essay. And don't let it just be mentioning that this is one particular idea and then a totally different idea, which is not linked to the first idea, is mentioned. Make sure there's a logical flow. All right. So your creative essays, writing, is there for you to be creative. Create the best scenario you can with the topics given to you. We are not saying to you, if you start with a narrative, you stick throughout the narrative. You can work within the types of essays, but remember, grade 12s, don't confuse yourself in trying to be too, too creative. Make sure that you know what you're writing and that you've employed the system of asking yourself when, what, why, where, who, and obviously how is this going to affect the reader. So employ that writing strategy. Okay. If you want to imagine that hamburger that you love so much, think about what is the first thing that attracts your attention to the hamburger. Then think about everything that is inside, between the two buns, the two parts of the bun. Think about the patty, the garnishing, the lettuce, the sauces, the mayonnaise, whatever it is, the gherkins that you love. Those are the various ideas that you would be thinking about, okay, to that particular topic. And then the last part is the conclusion that obviously joins the patty to the first part of the bun and then seals it all together. So think about it like that if you find it easier to do it that way. But just ensure that you have understood the various types of essays and how to craft your response to the essay. Please do not take a pre-planned essay and try and shove it into the exam paper to one of the topics given to you. You are going to falter, you're going to make yourself a fool basically, and we will know definitely that this is a forced idea. All right? So be original as possible. Okay, then we've got the transactional pieces. 2 of the pieces there for 25 marks. Now here again, please read all the topics and identify the genres that you are going to have to look at. In other words, remember, this is a transactional piece, meaning that you are expecting a response from the recipient. So write down a few ideas on each of the topics again, and then eliminate the ones that obviously are not for you. You're choosing 2 topics here. Underline and highlight all the keywords. Again, of the chosen genre so that you don't miss out any of the information. Okay, remember that here now you have a purpose for writing that particular piece of work. Now you have to establish why are you writing this text. If it's an interview, for example, what is the purpose of the interview and why is this interview taking place would have to be at the back of your head. All right, the audience is very important. So firstly the purpose and then the audience. The audience is obviously who is the text being written for, that you must take note of. All right, and then crucial is the register. Is this now going to be an informal letter, for example, or a formal letter or a formal email? All of those things you gotta be knowing that. Okay, so again, while you're thinking about the topic, look at it. If it's a formal letter, does it have the correct tone being used by you? Does it have the correct attitude that has been employed when you addressing the addressee? All right. The format, very important. What kind of format is expected of you? All right. If it's the formal letter, remember the two addresses, the reason for writing, the salutations must all be included. The signing off must be done as well. That's important things, okay, that you should be knowing about. Good. Then, if you're looking at what are we talking about in terms of the expectations of each of them, the letters I did mention to you, your address and the date. The next part to the left is the second address, and then there it's to the editor or the manager of a company, for example, depending on whether you're doing the letter of complaint or the letter to the press, okay? Then your salutation, where you got the topic sentence for what is the reason for this letter, and then paragraph 2, 3, and 4, for example, will be your body of the letters. In other words, the meat of what you want to say there, and then the conclusion, last paragraph, and underneath that will then be your closing and your name and surname there. Now, I'm not saying your own name and surname, because remember, you cannot put your own information there. It has to be an alias, okay? Somebody else that you must include there, because we don't want to know anything about who you are, okay? You are the exam number right now, and that's what you need to remember. And also remember that it will not be your teachers marking your piece of work. So you need to be able to ensure that that person who reads your piece of work understands exactly what you want to say when you are writing it. All right. Then with regards to the speech, remember during the year you have done a speech for orals, for example, or an unprepared piece as well. Remember, grade 12s, that's different. It was your oral. Now you're taking it from the point of how you write out your speech, okay? So again, you're keeping the audience in mind. You are making sure that if it's a formal piece of work to a formal audience, then your words that you use in that particular speech must be relevant. If it is looking at the occasion that you are using the speech for, maybe it's a matric farewell speech, or it is a motivational speech for other grade 11 or grade 10 learners. Those are things that you need to obviously look at when the purpose is being established. Your paragraph form, definitely remember, it's not just from one word to the end and that's your speech. You've got to have paragraphs. Again, main idea being discussed in each paragraph. All right. 3 to 4 ideas is important for this particular speech, because that will then give us 3 different ideas that you want to speak about. Logical, please make sure that when you are developing your particular speech, the ideas and the points are clear to the reader. And then make sure you've used appropriate language. All right. Then we've got the next 2 genres, which is the dialogue and the interview. Now remember there, please, This is the present speech that is being used. In other words, it's as if that particular dialogue or interview is taking place right now. All right. So, what do you need to do? Remember, the name of the person who is speaking must be written on the left hand side of the page. Then you've got the two dots, which is the colon. All right. And then from thereafter, all the words going to the next part will be the direct speech or the actual words that that particular person is saying. All right. And then you leave a line, and then the next person's information is included. Okay. So please remember, an interview would have an interviewer and an interviewee. All right. So there's two people involved. The dialogue as well, try and keep it to two people, because if you start to include more people, the chances are you could get very confused, and you would also then not know, have I focused too much on what Lorato is saying, for example, and forgot what Bridget is saying. All right. So remember to have an equal amount of ideas that each of the speakers are mentioning. All right. Then the transactional piece in terms of the review and the magazine article. So when we're looking at the review, please remember that this could be a review of a restaurant, for example. It could be a review of maybe a book that you've read. Okay. Again, it depends on the topic that's given to you. So if you're going to choose to do the review, please remember everything that you speak about must be factually based. Okay, so there must be an authentic name, an authentic place that you are speaking about. Then, when you're looking at what needs to be included, did you include, for example, if it's book review, the name of the book, the name of the author, the lead character's information? Have you included that? If it's a restaurant, where the name of the restaurant, where is it located? That sort of thing must come through. Okay, or who is the owner? Could be an owner of the franchises. All those things needs to be included. Then if you're looking again at the book review, have you included the publishing information, all right, of the company that's publishing the book, or a record label that might be dealing with an artist who is publishing his work. All right. And then the next thing that has to be included is obviously the area in which that particular restaurant, if it is a restaurant review, where is it located? Okay, that kind of thing. And then also, did you make use of paragraphs? So a review can be either the book review, the film review, the restaurant review, whatever it is that is asked of you, grade 12s, streamline these hints to the topic given to you. All right. Then the magazine article versus the newspaper article. Now remember, a newspaper article is different in the sense that it could be very much more factual. Okay. And the magazine article could employ the use of maybe some informal language, because remember, it could be a teen magazine that is spoken about, or a youth magazine that's spoken about, again looking at the topic. So when you are doing either of these two, please remember there has to be a headline and a byline. Have you included that? Okay. And then the writer's name obviously must be there. Okay. Have you noted the name of the writer, the date on which this particular article was published, and the place maybe that it needed to be mentioned or needed to be known. Okay. And then have you included the information in columns? Right. So that's important. And did you use the formal register? So as much as the magazine article, for example, might be for a teen magazine or for a youth magazine, the way in which you write it should not have so many contractions, informal language, that kind of thing. It is still a formal piece of work. All right. So please make sure that you are taking note of that. So, is the article, importantly to note, factual news article, or is it an opinion based piece of work, okay, or a feature article? Is the article then probably, um, you know, important in the sense that it's talking about a vital issue that is happening, that is supposed to be at the back of your head because that's the purpose for why you're writing this particular piece? Then you need to ask yourself, have I broken up the sections into subheadings? Are my paragraphs short and factual, for example, and not long? Okay. And if a person reads my article, can they just scan through and get the gist of what I'm talking about? All right. And then get the specific information, obviously. Then we've got the next one, which is the obituary. So, you can't now spot and say, I'm going to write this particular genre. It may not be there. So make sure you go through all of the genres, okay? So the obituary is when we are paying tribute to someone who has passed on. Please, that is important, okay? You can't write your own obituary because you're still alive, okay? So somebody who is no longer on the physical earth is who you need to be aware of when doing the obituary. So it will include the information about the person's life. So here's some hints, grade 12. In the opening, you're going to be including the full name of the deceased. You're going to mention the date of the death of the person. You're going to mention the cause of death and then where the person was living at the time of his or her death. Thereafter, your next couple of paragraphs, 2, 3, 4, will include the biographical details of the person. Okay? Then your next part can be a brief summary of his or her achievements, or basically schools that they have attended over their lifetime, or education facilities that they've attended, or maybe even their occupation, because people maybe have moved from one occupation to another. Include that if it is the case. All right. And then, as I mentioned, maybe that person was involved in community events or had many achievements that could be spoken about in those paragraphs. Okay. Then the final paragraphs is where you're going to include the survivors of the deceased. Okay. And then now the survivors are not talking about the 45th cousin, it's talking about the immediate survivors. Okay. And then most importantly, the details of the service that is to take place. Please list, for example, like the parents, the spouse, the siblings that have been left behind. And then when you're giving the details of the funeral, mention the date on which the funeral will take place and the venue for that. And then please, grade 12s, conclude with a message of condolence. Okay. And you can say maybe in lieu of flowers or donations, they can give something else. All right. So that would be part of the conclusion. Good. Then we've got the email. Now, this is a much easier one to do. It may appear, it may not appear. We don't know what's in the paper. But if you get the email, you need to obviously ensure that it looks something like this, where you've got the recipient. So firstly, from will be who is sending the email. The recipient is the one that's going to receive it. So whoever it is at what. Okay. Then the carbon copy, which is the CC here, is the email address of a person that you want to send this particular information to over and above the immediate recipient. Okay. So let's say, for example, your name is Kamo, right? So Kamo wrote an email to, let's say, Vash. Okay. So Kamo is the sender, Vash is the recipient. And then Kamo wants somebody else to also get the information that he's relating to Vash. So the CC, which is the carbon copy, will be the exact email will go to, let's say, Lerato. Okay, so that is the CC. And then underneath all of that will then be the content of the email. So you start to count the word from the first word after the part where you have the subject. Okay, then you start counting word number 1 all the way to word number 200, for example. Okay, and then basically that is how you would do the email. And at the bottom of that you would then say, let's just go back there, sorry, where you got the signing off. Okay, here for example, where you would then say, hoping to see you soon, or whatever it is, depending to the topic, again relate to the topic, and then a person's name underneath that. Okay, signing off. Now we don't expect you to put all of this information there on the email, because that's what the computer screen will give us. All right, we are only interested in this part here when we are marking the email. All right, and then if you want to do the BCC, it's that invisible recipient. So over and above, Vash and Lerato getting the message, then maybe you want Thomas to get the message as well. You'll BCC him, and he will receive the email, but Vash and Lerato will not know that he received the email. So it's the invisible recipient. All right, that's the BCC. So please, again, take note of the requirements of the email and make sure that the content that you've spoken about is very clear. Right, the review format, which we spoke about previously. Remember, provide the brief background. All right, the body again there needs to have the brief discussion of the key incidents without giving away the plot. And then the conclusion, recall, is when you give an opinion or a recommendation to read this or that. All right, the style and tone, very important. Please remember, although we might say there's informal pieces of work, they all have to have a formal tone. Okay, and then very much subjective when it is the review. The report is also something that might feature, and this is when we are communicating information that we have got through research or investigations. All right, and then we're trying to obviously give an idea to the audience. So you would then say to the person or the organization that you're going to send this report to, the title will be the investigation, for example, or what you have been investigating, and then why you are going to write this report is important. And then basically you will explain all the things you have found out, or all the things that had to take place for a particular experiment to take place. You will include that. And then the findings part is where you're going to give us the final result of what happened. And then the conclusion would then be where you give us a short, concise statement telling us what you have concluded. All right. So if you're looking at possible recommendations in your report, that is where you're going to state on what can happen going forward from here based on your findings. And then we have to have also the information of the reporter who is giving us this information, and then you sign off the report. So this is a bit more tricky and more advanced to do, but if you are that writer who wants to take the chance and make sure that you can excel at it, then please go back and look at all the requirements of the report before you attempt it. All right, so some recommendations for you grade 12s with regards to section B. Please, you have to practice this paper before tomorrow. So make sure that you have looked at the past 3 to 5 years of papers and looked at the possible topics that have appeared there, yes, and think about something that will be linked to these kind of ideas that have come through in the last 3 to 5 years, okay? When you get the paper, I did say to you 10 minutes of reading time. Make sure that you have chosen the topic that you want to speak about, and then look for one that appeals to you. Remember the diagrams, the spiral diagrams, or the mind maps that I asked you to make sure are thoroughly done to show us evidence of planning. And then always remember to keep the target audience in mind. And please have an intriguing conclusion when you are doing the transactional. Please edit the work thoroughly. Check it at least 3 times before you submit your paper for marking at the end of this 3 hours tomorrow. Write from your own experience as far as possible and be sincere with what you're saying. Please listen to the news. Look at possible scenarios happening at the moment, current events that are taking place that are affecting you as a South African or a youth coming out of the system. How are you going to now be able to live a comfortable life because of events that are taking place? This is where we're going to test you on in terms of the papers, okay? The format of the transactional writing pieces, please, is still a problem, grade 12s. Go back, study all your formats. Make sure that you know the structure of the letter to the editor. You know the structure of the dialogue versus the interview, the obituary, the speech. All of those things need to be looked at. All right. Then, please, with regards to the draft, strike off the draft and then make sure that we know final means that is the one that we need to mark. The draft must be edited so that it's not an identical copy of the neat one. Please, it's frustrating when a marker goes all the way through a piece of work and then realizes that you turn over the page and the final one is there. So make sure that rough work is rough work and it's struck off so that the marker knows where to then go and mark the final one. And please don't write personal comments to the markers. They are not there to be your friends. They are there to assess the piece of work according to the rubric and give you a mark. Don't make any silly comments because that would then obviously put you at risk of creating an irregularity for yourself and therefore jeopardizing your results at the end of the exams. All right, so grade 12s, that is basically all I wanted to share with you with regards to your paper 3 for tomorrow. Please, the topic is the vital part of the paper. Read the topic, understand the topic that you have chosen, make sure the ideas you have put down is relevant to the topic you have chosen, and make sure then that you tie it up with a good conclusion. You've taken note of the purpose, the target audience, for example, the register that is important, and obviously you've captured in terms of the creative essay, if you're using the visual stimuli or the quote, that you've captured the necessary information. All right? So crucial is the topic. Please understand the topic thoroughly before you write that particular piece of work. Grade 12s, I want to wish you all the best for tomorrow. Please maximize the opportunity given to you. Don't waste it. If you get a good springboard for your paper 3, then it is not so much of pressure for you to perform excellently, for example, in paper 2 and 1, but still perform at a very good level to keep your average at least above 60 to 70% if possible. All right? Remember, the real world is going to say, we need somebody who has an average of 60, 70% and above. Right? If you want to have a good future, make sure you do that. You're not going to be able to go and study, for example, if you're having a 35% in English home language. You're not even going to pass the exams. So please make sure that you use this paper as a springboard to start the journey of success for paper 2 and 1 that is to come. All right, all the best for tomorrow. Let the nerves settle. Rest well tonight and make sure tomorrow you are bright and ready for the piece of writing that you need to produce for us, and that you are refreshed as well. Okay? Thank you for watching this lesson this afternoon, grade 12s. And until I catch you again for another revision lesson for English Home Language, please take care of your health, take care of yourselves, and all the best for tomorrow.